Well, hello everyone. Welcome yet again to another Renegade Con interview. I am your host, Chris Whiphant. Today I am joined by Miss Elisa Teague. Is that right, Elisa? It's not Eliza or anything
It's
crazy? Okay,
no,
perfect.
it's Lisa. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited because if you paid any attention to the Renegade news earlier this week night, and I kind of hope you did because we said some stuff and we announced that, Elisa is joining our team and kind of coming into the fold, and that's super exciting. Like so how does that make you feel, Lisa? Did you go to Disney World or anything?
Excited. Yeah, no, I'm super excited to work with the Renegade team. I've been a big fan and friends with everybody for so long, and it took a lot to bring me to a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to give up my freelance game design life and join in with the company full time. But if anybody was going to do it, it was going to be Renegade. They're a great company.
Awesome. And, it's one of the things that, excited me about coming to work for them is just the variety of things that we do. And I think that has to play into it, right? Because, you did do one thing for us. You did the Wardlings RPG, correct?
I did. And I think that's what really got me to form this like bond and see how the company worked. And I
Hmm.
really loved all the people that I got to work with on Wardlings, and everything came together so wonderfully. And I was like, yeah, this is a really cool company. And yes, I own a ton of Renegade Games, studio games, and a ton of games in general. But I love what the company does, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Now, I do a little research because as much as I'd like to think I know everybody in the business, you were not somebody who hit my radar a lot. So I kind of had to do a little digging, and I'm just amazed. You do so many different things. Like you design games, you write RPGs. It's amazing. How would you kind of describe all the things you do?
I wear, or I guess I have worn a lot of hats in the industry. I've been in the game industry for 20 years now,
Hmm.
and a lot of people don't know my name, and I think that's because I was really behind the scenes for a really long time. I used to work for a game company called Playroom Entertainment, which is now part of Ultra Pro.
Hmm.
And when I started working there, I started off doing graphic design, art direction kind of stuff, and then
Okay.
production and then product development, and then suddenly I was in charge of all of like the pre-production everything,
Wow.
and from inventor relations, product development, through art direction. And so I learned how to do basically everything in the industry that way. And then I also went to conventions, and I was doing the sales side, retail sales side at conventions. And so I learned a lot, and I moved out onto my own doing freelance, and I've gotten to do all of those things, including consulting for many game companies in the industry. And so people kind of know who I am in the industry, but I haven't had my name emblazoned on a lot of boxes until the last 5 years or so,
Right.
where I've been doing a lot more game design work.
Now you have a big hand in, and it's right above you there, all the geek outs. Am I correct? And just kind of like that's it's it's a different kind of tack that we're used to with all the trivia and everything going on there. So is that kind of what like maybe got you started in this, or what kind of brought
It
that on?
definitely did not get me started in the game industry. I did geek out for Playroom, but after I left Playroom full
Oh,
time, which was really interesting. But again, I keep really great relationships with everybody,
sure.
and I'm always designing games for everybody. And yes, they approached me to do a geeky party social trivia game, and I was like, I can do that, where you're not just ask the question and then answering that question, and then
Right.
you're done. So I designed Geek Out and for them, and now it's exploded. It has many different versions. It has a Disney version. I can't tell where it's behind me. Um, there's a Disney version. It's my Vanna White. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And yes, a lot of people do know me from Geek Out, but I've done a lot more strategy game
Hmm.
design and role-playing game design for the most part. It just Geek Out. I guess everybody just knows it.
It's just the shelf staple, right? So,
Sure.
but speaking of those, like the first place I think I encountered your work was probably going to be with the Betrayal House on the Hill. You had a hand in the Widow's Walk. Um, how did that come about? Because that's like a lot of people had hands in that one.
That's a really fun story. So the original game, Betrayal at House on the Hill, was one of my favorite entry
Hmm.
level, kind of like gateway games that I would show to people who didn't necessarily play these types of games.
Okay.
When when they would say, "Oh yeah, I play board games," and they would say, Clue or Scrabble or Monopoly, which are all great games to start with. Everybody, I think, starts with those as a kid. And so I would always break out Betrayal because that was always the one that was the hook. And it was a favorite of mine. And for many, many years, I begged one of the designers on that, Mike Selinker, like, can we do a sequel? Can we do a sequel? Can we do a sequel? And I was working on Bloomstar Games for a while, and I just kept, nagging him, and he wanted to do it too. And I think it was just being held up by, Avalon Hill, not knowing like would it be successful. And so uh, we actually kind of stayed. It wasn't, I don't know how to explain it, but we were on stage at PAX West, I believe it was. And we were doing a panel and we were both on there. And somebody in the audience asked us both, what game, if we could do any game, what game would we want to do? And we just said it. And then, like, it just spread throughout PAX, and I think it just got back to Wizards of the Coast, Avalon Hill, and we got to do it. And so Mike said, "Do you want to be the lead designer on this?" And I said, "Absolutely, I do." He knew that I was such a huge fan and that I would take care of it, and so I did all of the uh, new mechanics for the tiles and things like that. I worked with Liz Bain, who was the other lead designer on there, and we did all of those new mechanics for the sequel, and then I got all those writers together, edited all of their stories, and made sure
Wow.
everything worked very, very quick. I was super impressed by the entire team, and yes, I'm very proud of it. It's
That
a pure
must have
family feeling.
that must have been a lot of fun chasing everybody down to get their stories in. I mean,
It was fun. No, it's just great working with everybody. It really was.
awesome. I mean, also at that time they were kind of coming off of the tabletop, you know, high from Betrayal because that got. I remember, that was back when tabletop put a game on and it just sold out. Like you couldn't find it. So
Definitely, that show it was a make it or break it for lots of games. Like any game that got on there and was enjoyed by the people who were playing on the show definitely did very well. Geek Out was on that show as well,
right.
so which I was very happy about. But yes, I think that show showed off Betrayal to a whole new group of game players that didn't really know about it because Betrayal for a really long time was like a cult classic.
Yeah, it really was, and it's a lot of fun. I actually my friends were kind of curious about it because I brought up the new Scooby Doo version, right? Like, because I think that's just silly and fun and great, and I'm like, well, we have I have the legacy version if we want to try getting into it. So we kind of went down that road. So I kind of we'll see if I got them hooked though. I don't know.
Yeah, I have all those. I don't have Scooby Doo yet, but it's on my list, and I have the Dungeons and Dragons version, Betrayal at
Okay.
Baldur's Gate.
Right, right.
So I get my D&D people into playing more board games. Is I'm like, oh, let's just play this. It's sort of like playing. You know the storyline behind this, right?
Right.
And so I've gotten a lot of people hooked that way.
So how was it getting to work on like a property that you loved like that? Was it like intense and kind of frightening and don't want to damage it, or is this the I have the toy box, let's have some fun?
A little bit of both. It's like that every single time when I am given a licensed game to work on. And I've worked on a bunch of licenses and it's always like that. And it's always the most exciting thing in the world. I did, the Talisman Betrayal. I'm sorry. I did the Kingdom Hearts version of Talisman, which was also a really big thing because Talisman was a game. Talisman was kind of like my Monopoly
Okay.
growing up, and so it was one of those games where it was just a staple. You know, everybody played Talisman, and then I got to throw Kingdom Hearts on it and play in a world that I absolutely loved. And I love every Disney property. And so getting to do that, getting to do the Geek Out Disney stuff, you know, it's always a little bit frightening, but it's also so exhilarating to be, you know, a part of making something that you love so much. You know, I feel the same way when I'm writing things for Dungeons and Dragons as well. It's like
Right.
I've been since I was 13 years old, and now I get to, you know, do things like that actually change canon in this world. It's amazing.
It's got to be an incredible feeling. The Kingdom
Mm-hmm.
Hearts was definitely something I wanted to ask about because, you know, it was right at the end of my years when Kingdom Hearts kind of came out, and it was this interesting, amazing thing that kind of combined all the Disney properties and let you kind of open world it a little bit to an extent, like
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy for Disney files, right? I guess is the best way to put it.
Pretty
Um,
much.
yeah, right. And so, how was it? Like, did they say like we have this property and this is what we want to put it with, or how did that kind of come to be?
They knew that I was a fan and a game designer, obviously, and so they, you know, kind of brought me on to be able to mesh the two. I'm When I'm a fan of something, and there are certain things that I'm like a super fan of. When I'm a fan of something, I learn every single detail about that thing, and I
Right.
know the ins and outs of all of it. And that's just how I am as a geek, right? And it's a lot of what Geek Out is principled on. Like, you know, yes, I can name, you know, 50 Buffy the Vampire Slayer characters off the top of my head right now if you wanted me to. I can, you know, I do all of those things. And so when you're putting a license on an existing game, especially, it's really important that that license doesn't feel like it's just slapped on.
Right.
And you know, the Kingdom Hearts version of Talisman was the first in their line to be done, and they've since done, you know, the Batman one, and there are more coming out. And you know, I think that if I would have known that I could play around with the talisman mechanics even more, like some of the newer ones are doing, I probably would have done even more to it. But I really tried to be careful to make sure that everything felt like you were in Kingdom Hearts. Everything you did, every decision that you would make
Hmm.
would be like, hey, are these characters going to really do that? And I had to tweak a lot of those mechanics because in Talisman, you're actually in classic Talisman, you're fighting with your opponents, right? You can
Right.
actually go to their space and you can, like, you know, attack another player. But in Kingdom Hearts, if I'm playing Mickey and you're playing Donald, like, Mickey and Donald aren't going to fight. That is not how those characters act towards each other. So I had to actually change the victory condition, change the rules quite a bit,
Hmm.
to make the emphasis more on assisting each other, but still have a clear winner with victory points, like who got the most accomplished, instead of harming each other to get them out of the game. And
Okay.
so it was an interesting design challenge for sure. But
Interesting.
I really like being challenged when I'm doing work like this.
So it leads me to ask the question because I'm immediately think Kingdom Hearts. I think the Kingdom Keepers book series. What kind of books do you like to read? Like, what do you look for inspiration?
I read well, I will say that 90% of what I read is fantasy and sci-fi for
Gotcha.
sure. That is what the rest are filled up with, you know, comic books and a lot of historical. I like historical fiction a lot.
Hmm.
I actually used to want, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a historical fiction uh,
Okay.
writer, you know, and with a huge bent on fantasy. And I guess with the role playing stuff, I sort of am now, which is kind of fun. But that's the bulk of what I read. But I also am always reading material on whatever I am working on at the time.
Okay.
So so at any game that I'm working on, I'm reading not only all of the source material for whatever that world is, the license is. If there is no license, I am reading things that I feel evoke the feel of whatever I
Hmm.
want players to feel while they're playing that game, just to get into that mindset. So yeah.
Awesome. Would you have a favorite author or favorite series to recommend? Because I'm
Oh my
always
goodness,
looking.
that's
I'm always
really
looking.
hard. I hate the word favorite. Right now, I'll say outside of the stuff that I'm working on actively
Hmm.
right now that I can quite talk about. I'm having a lot of fun with some really it's light sci-fi stuff by John Scalzi. So I've been working through his
Okay.
entire catalog. I think right now in these times with the pandemic and everything going on, um, it's really enjoyable, humorous writing that also has a lot of philosophy underneath it all that I like really feel in tune with. And so I don't know, that's what I've been reading lately. So if you haven't checked out Scalzi's work, I highly recommend him. I don't think that that's one that's thrown out there all that often.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love all the classics, but that's what I've been reading lately.
Awesome. No, he's definitely great. And I did Old Man's War, I believe was him, right?
I just read Old Man's War, so yes,
There you
it's
go. Um,
fascinating the way his mind works.
yeah, it's you're right. We're not talking like Foundation series level sci-fi. It's very easy to read through, and it's not. I don't need to take notes for it. But you're right. I like it. Good recommendation, and a
Yeah,
total curveball. I know. I
that's
know.
why I like it too. Yeah, I think that's why I like it too. I think it's because I do have to take notes on everything else that I'm reading all the time because
Okay.
it's mostly research that I can kind of just check out and enjoy the writing, and it's it's light, but there's depth underneath it all. So yeah. Anyway, that's my recommendation.
There you go. There you go. So let's fast forward a little bit, and you talked about it briefly with running into Scott Gata and coming together to do Wardlings. Now we've heard Scott's version of the story, which is just kind of where he walks over to WizKids and he says, "Hey, this would make a great game, an RPG." But that's kind of it. There's a lot of blanks here. I need you to fill in for me.
I will do my best. Um, okay, my version is Scott approached me and asked if I knew what Wardlings was, the line, and of
Hmm.
course I did. I love all of WizKids stuff a lot, way too much. I have so many minis, and so the problem with Wardlings was that here was this amazing line of painted miniatures, little kids and their familiars, but people didn't really know what to do with them. You could put them in your game as background. Here's a kid, or you want to play this kid, or if kids wanted to play D&D, they could put them in, but there were no rules made for
Hmm.
children as characters, and it was a little weird. Everybody loved the minis and bought the minis, but they didn't really know what to do with them. And so Scott approached me and said, "Oh, hey, we're getting this license from WizKids. Would you be interested in making a world for it?" And of course, I jumped at the chance, and I was like, "Yes, this is again one of those design challenges that I love so much." And then I realized what I was getting myself into. And, there were a few waves of the minis out, and there really wasn't any story behind them. All I had as source material
Mm.
was one conversation with Brian over at WizKids about how he kind of came up with this idea, and that he envisioned a story where there were these children and they don't die because they're kids, and he didn't want any game to have kids that would perish in battle,
Sure.
especially if the target was towards tweens and teens. And I said okay. And then the only source material I had was the packaging on the back of each miniature, which were things like boy ranger goes out into the forest, with his wolf. And it was very simple. And I was like, okay, I need to do this, write a world in which these kids live, explain why they don't die, and
Hmm.
explain how they age, and explain how they have their magic, and why. That was the other thing Brian said. He said, I only want the kids to have magic. So I had to explain, why is it that we are in a world where adults suddenly don't have magic? And what do their familiars do for them? And then write that entire world up, and then do the mechanics for them all. And that's how Wardlings came to be. And it was really fun to do. And I hope that there will be more. I can say there will be more coming from that front
Wow.
in the future.
So, what made you decide to build it on 5th edition? I mean, a lot of other things have built on different versions, and 5th edition is, well, I guess it's been around for a little while now. But what made you choose to use that as your kind of base for everything?
Fifth edition, I think, is the easiest system for people to learn that want to play a campaign style
Hmm.
setting. And I love a lot of other systems as well. I will say that fifth edition is really, Dungeons and Dragons in general is very close to my heart. I know it inside and out. I've been playing it for 30 years. And so I've played every single edition of Dungeons and Dragons. So I knew the mechanics very well. We had a timeline for the project where it obviously needed to use an existing system, and I felt that this fit the best. I also think that the marketing for Dungeons and Dragons has gotten so big and well known that everybody knows what it is. And most people who have played a role playing game have played that role playing game. And so basing Wardlings on the fifth edition rules was a no brainer for me, because here we have a fantasy world. It fits right in. You can now take these rules and put them into any fifth edition game that you are playing. It's a universal system. And now kids who want, or adults who want to play children, and play as a wardling, whether they're playing on, Ormia, which is the world that I, made for wardlings, or if they want to take those characters and bring them into their existing Dungeons and Dragons game, they can do either one, and it's kind of universal. And I feel like once a wardling has aged to the point where they are an adult and they may lose their magic, that character doesn't need to go away. You can then continue playing that character with regular fifth edition rules as well.
There
And
you
so
go.
there's a lot of flexibility there, and I think it fits really well.
Interesting. It sounds like it's a very unique system where it doesn't treat children like children, right? Like it really treats them like young adults and their own person and their own people. And I think that's empowering kids is awesome, right?
Oh, I definitely agree. I love the fact that these kids are more powerful than pretty much any adult they're going to come across, unless that adult is evil and has powers through nefarious means, right?
Right.
I have found that most of my friends who have little kids, they said, oh, I want to buy this, to play with my kids, and then they bought the book and now they're playing it with their friends,
Awesome.
and so they're in their 40s, 50s, and they are playing wardlings as children. But it's definitely adults that are playing. The rule system isn't less complicated for kids. It is still the same rule system. It actually has a new layer of rules for spells and things like that. But it
Hmm.
is playable by kids. I'll say that because if I was able to play Dungeons and Dragons with rules at 13 years old, and any 13-year-old can play fifth edition for sure.
There you go. Awesome. And more on the way, hopefully. I heard a little tease in there working up. So
That's my plan.
Hopefully it's ours too, and we'll find out about it then. Meanwhile, if you guys want, we are running demos of Wardlings all weekend long during the convention, so be sure to check that out. And we love putting this on. Anne puts on a really good adventure, so I highly recommend it. Be sure to check that out if you're interested, because sometimes somebody doesn't make a game, so you might be able to sneak in and get it there. So excellent. So this kind of leads us to you have this game with us, we publish it, you forge this wonderful relationship with the Renegade family, as it were. And now all of a sudden, well, it's not all of a sudden, it's been a little while in the making, you're now part of the team and you're on board. And, we technically, Renegade publishes 2 or 3 games ourselves. So that doesn't feel like that's enough work to need a director of RPGs and everything that you're going to bring. So why are you here, Elisa? What's got you up and excited that you want to sign on to play with the toys?
Well, I was brought on specifically because the RPG line at Renegade is growing, and so it has just been announced that we are going to be doing some really cool licenses coming in the future, and I'm going to say all, but I will say that almost all of my childhood favorites are playing games, and I get to be in charge of it all.
That's just
so I'm really, it's like a dream come true.
Right. So we're talking a bunch of the Hasbro properties are kind of coming under our care now, and one of those is going to be RPGs, and we know we have a standing relationship because we have Power Rangers. So is that going to be one that we're going to kind of start with and go from there?
You hit the nail on the head. Yes, Power Rangers is definitely going to be coming to you soon in role-playing game form, and I'm super excited about it. You will be able to create your own ranger using new character creation rules, and you will also, if you want to, you can play any of the pre-generated existing rangers. And yes, it's going to be a lot of fun to bring this out. I'm very excited about it.
Right? It's super exciting. Like, we already have a lot of miniatures from the board games already, so we're kind of primed and ready for this. Like, this kind of makes a lot of sense, and I think it's going to be super exciting.
Yes, I think that the Power Rangers fans have been poorly underserved for a very long time until Renegade came around and started bringing out all these awesome games. And the miniatures game is wonderful, but I think that they are going to flip when they get to be in basically what is an open sandbox for playing their own ranger.
That's so exciting. I think it's one of the worlds that kind of really, I feel like it's one that we can just kind of dive in, because it's average kids who are teenagers when we were teenagers, and they just got this amazing stuff to happen to them, like Last Starfighter style, and it's just amazing to be able to just normal kid walking around, then all of a sudden bammo, it's like
teleported and given all these powers. Sure,
right. It's gonna be amazing. I can't wait. I just watched the Toys That Made Us. I did watch the episode they did on the Power Rangers on Netflix, and that opened my eyes, and I'm like, I had no idea. Like, something I watched a few times. I wasn't big into it, but it sounds super exciting.
Yeah, I'm thrilled about it.
So we have a few other ones that we may have announced. Is there one or two that kind of stick out that kind of like you are just chomping at the bit to get knee deep into?
Yes. I will say that, well, I mean, they all are. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a schedule, and so it's one by one. But, I was telling Scott this story, and I've told this story to quite a few people in the past, and I don't know if it's just me telling this story that like put it out into the universe, or something that like drew me to this position. But when I was a little kid, my brother and I were very fortunate. We had a huge playroom in our house, and it had a like vinyl floor, and we had we had a huge toy closet, and we were 2 years apart, and we used to play together all the time. And we would set up wars, and it would be me with my Little Ponies and my Masters of the Universe figures, because I love that IP as well. Then so all on my Little Ponies as mounts, and he would have his Transformers and GI Joes, and we set up this mix of all of these toys that we had, and do wars. And we had rules that we made up about, turn it was to like, and this was well before I was playing, D&D or anything like that, and well before I even knew what like a miniatures game would be. And we were probably 8 and 6 years old, and did that for a few years. And so it was just one of those things where it's one of my biggest childhood memories, is that we would have these campaigns that would go on, and we would leave it all set up. And luckily we had a room in the house where our parents let us leave that all set up, and we would just have vast armies of this stuff all playing together. Fast forward many years, and I am now going to be able to write and produce on these amazing titles that include some of these products, which are GI Joe, Transformers, My Little Pony. I don't know. It's almost like my childhood predicted this future for me, and it's really strange. But I'm going to be getting to do that and bringing it all to you guys, and then you're going to get to play in that world.
Get to play with your toys again.
And these things will exist, and these things might exist, in a way that they can be played together. And so that is really, really exciting.
Yep. And I think as a child of that era too, it's like you had both the toys. You had your GI Joes and you had your Transformers, and inevitably, the Hiss tank would go up against Optimus Prime at some point in your day. Like, it just happened. So
I'm not kidding. That's exactly how it was. So yeah, it's really cool. I don't know. And like the ideas are just like exploding in my mind. It's really hard to stop thinking about how things interact, how mechanics will work, what I can do for each property, and focus on, one at a time, Elisa.
Yeah. But I think, if we can look back at your history, and we can look at, how you've treated other properties you've done, and how much care and attention you took with Wardlings, and the detail, and ladies and gentlemen, that's a thick book. This is not just a little paperback, campaign guide. No, you put a lot of love and care into that development in that book. And, if you bring that to bear on these, we're going to be kids again. I mean, let's face it.
I want to make like 2,000-page books for all of these things, because there's so much lore. There's so much history. There's so much to write about, and that's kind of how I felt about Wordlings. Wordlings scratched the surface of this world that I created. And that's why, with future books, we'll be able to see more of the planet. We'll be able to see more of the details, zooming in on each city and what goes on in each of those cities. And so now I'm looking at these new properties. I'm like, okay, we're going to have to do the basics, and then hopefully be able to come out with more and more materials so that everybody can have this enriched world. The positive thing is that game masters that are running these games have so much material to draw from. You've got comic books and cartoons and movies, and so many storylines that are jumping off points that you can say, oh, you want to play, this against this enemy, this villain. Okay, I already know all about that because I grew up with this, and there are existing stories, so I can fill in the background. But we're going to be providing so much information, and it's going to be like traveling back into time, into your childhood. I'm really excited. Keep
It's
saying
going.
excited, but that's the right word.
It's kind of hard not to be.
Mhm.
It's very cool. We can't wait to see what happens as a result. So, well, I think on that bombshell, I don't think it's going to get much better. So I think why don't we just kind of call this done here? Elisa, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with us today, and sharing your love and your excitement for this. This is great.
Thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure to be part of this and to now be part of Renegade. I cannot wait.
Yep. And, she's going to be around all weekend. So we have, a couple panels coming up. Be sure to check them out. We're going to be growing Wardlings. So if you are intrigued by the Wardlings conversation in the world a little bit, that's going to be a fabulous workshop. And check that out. We're also doing a live play of Wardlings. Our weekly show is going to be done live. We have a storytelling, basically, it's Elisa's convention. I'm just here to run it. I think that's where we're at right now tonight.
I don't know about that, but I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. So be sure to check that out, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your convention. Thanks so much for watching.
Bye.